Well, hello, friends, and happy Thursday to you. If you're joining me on the replay, happy replay to you as well. A big hello, my friends. Welcome to Level Up. We are live, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's live Level Up conversation.
Welcome to Level Up with Winnie Sun.
Well, hello, friends. I'm Winnie Sun, your host, Forbes contributor, CNBC council member, and award-winning financial pro, here to keep you on top of relevant, trending business news. But as you know, I'm so grateful to have you here with me. It is such an honor to spend today with you, and thanks so much for making the time. You know, we're going to be sharing audience feedback during our community moment today, because today is really special. I'm actually excited to welcome you back to the show because we have a very special guest with us today. Let me just tell you, I have been doing some research. I've been doing some soul searching too, but also I've been just so excited about today's special guest. He is someone that you're definitely going to want to hear from. But before we do, you know, I've got to give you a chance to update you on the financial markets. So here's how we fared today. Now, unfortunately, triple down day. Like if there was rain in Southern California, it'd be raining today, but it's not. But still, the market actually closed down. Dow closed down 518 points today. NASDAQ closed down 538 points. S&P down 111 points. I thought that was going to be like 100 and 18 to like round that number off. But unfortunately, down all across the board. Today, the U.S. stock market seemed to follow that old adage that, well, when one falls down, we all topple down, because Facebook parent Meta Platforms and PayPal and also Forbes, not Forbes, I should probably, Ford reported disappointing quarterly results or expectations, which really unfortunately spurred on a domino effect with more drops in the stock market. But, you know, there's always better days ahead. And certainly now we're going to move to the better fun part of our discussion today, because the highlight of today is a very special individual that I'm excited to introduce you to. That is the one and only Scott Miller. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Winnie, I'm great. Nice to see you. Thanks for the interview today.
Well, thank you so much, my friend, for being here. What a treat. I got to take a moment, Scott, and just say thank you for being here, because I'm going to tell you, I've been doing so much research on you. I feel like we were like siblings or friends that have known each other for years. And I just found out also that you have 3 boys, you have 3 sons, and I have 3 sons. They're almost like the same age too.
They're almost exactly the same age, but you seem to be taking it better because you look like $1 million, and I look like I'm much older than I am, because raising boys is tough, is it not, Winnie?
You know, raising boys is tough, but I've heard that raising girls is even tougher. So actually, for those of you who are joining us, I see Vicky joining us Facebook Live. I think Paul's joining us from LinkedIn Live. I see Modern Mom. I see Joshua on YouTube Live. You know, what do you think? Do you think Scott's right? Do you think raising boys is tougher, girls are tough? I'm interested to hear what you all have to say. Yeah, definitely say hello to Scott, because he's so amazing. He doesn't think this, but what I love about Scott is, I'm going to tell you, we're going to have to love on you a little bit, because you are sort of like the definition of owning the human side of all of us, right? I love that so many of your books start with the word mess, because I think a lot of us can identify with, we wake up and sometimes we feel like we're a mess. We have 3 sons and sometimes we feel like we're a mess. And, sometimes like I feel like my desk is not as nice, and I would use the same word, but you seem to have used that and have written so many best-selling books with that in the title. That's pretty awesome.
It's true. And I thank you for the compliment. I've spent my entire 30-year career in the leadership development industry with the FranklinCovey Company, of course, founded by Dr. Stephen R. Covey, the author of the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and was the chief marketing officer of this global public company for a decade. And what I began to realize is that most leadership books were very aspirational. You can see many behind me, like these are the books in my podcast studio, and they all kind of ended up wrapping up nicely with a bow. That's not how leadership is. That's not how life or parenting is. And so I wrote a series of books, marketing mess to brand success, management mess to leadership success, job mess to career success. And because I think as leaders, as parents, as spouses, as friends, we have to acknowledge that we all have messes in life. And the more we can talk about them and teach through them, we make it safe for other people to own their mess as well. I think it's just fine to be able to be vulnerable enough. It's actually a competency, a leadership competency, to talk about your mistakes and your challenges and then teach through them. People want to relate to their leaders now more so perhaps than ever.
Agree. Like I couldn't say yay to that even more than I could now. But Scott, I love this because you're learning from other people's mistakes. That's how we get better, right? You're learning from their successes, but also their mistakes and that human connection that each of us has. You have this book that you shared, I know it came out last September, called Master Mentors, a 30 transformative insights from our greatest minds. And I love this because I've actually been listening to many of your podcast episodes. And I want to say, we got to give a shout out because certainly you have the top performing, top growing leadership podcast out in the universe. So a big hurrah for you on
Thank
Scott.
you.
And I can understand why, because I started listening to it, Scott, I actually couldn't turn it off. And
That's good.
that's good. That's really good. And so thank you so much for sharing this. And one thing I've heard you say on a couple of your shows and interviews of you is that you feel like you're sort of that person who is great at collecting stories, right? I've
Yeah.
heard you call it a pollination, if you will. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think as I have, moved into the second phase of my career, not the crescendo yet, but I'm 53 and I'm looking now at what my skills and my talents and my passions and what my genius is I really think it's as a pollinator, to quote you, as an aggregator, is that I don't have to invent. I don't have to be a original creator in order to be a value maker. That I think part of my job is to provide a platform, much like you, Winnie, a spotlight onto where there is great genius, whether it be a best-selling author or a business titan or a celebrity, or perhaps someone that isn't well known, but they've paid the price to research something around parenting or marketing or culture or the financial markets, whatever it is, and I can help to bring a spotlight to them. So I very much enjoy now this role of being pollinator and aggregator. The book you mentioned, Master Mentors, is basically me shining a spotlight onto 30 of our podcast guests on the podcast that I host, On Leadership with Scott Miller, now the world's largest weekly leadership podcast, whether it be Seth Godin or Dan Pink or Liz Wiseman or any number of people. I write a short, breezy chapter about something that they shared, sometimes on air or sometimes off air with their permission. It's kind of like that chicken soup for the leadership soul, where I collect their great stories and then share some of my own struggles around how they've mentored me through some of these own insights. So I'm privileged to have that platform now, that position to be able to bring access to some of the greatest minds in the world. And Master Mentors is now a 10-volume series. I've just finished Master Mentors Volume 2 with 30 new mentors and 30 new insights. And I'm just now beginning Master Mentors Volume 3 on my way to 10 books in that series.
That's incredible. I love it. And perhaps you even wrote some of it here on your last visit in Orange County. But here's what I want to ask you, Scott. I've heard about what you're doing now. I've certainly studied it, but I would like to learn your backstory and how you came to your role today. Because, you've been in a company now 20 plus years. I want to know not only your backstory, but also what excites you each morning starting your day.
Sure. So I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, as you mentioned, with my wife and our 3 young sons. But I'm actually from Orlando, Florida, originally born and raised in Central Florida, lived there for my first 26 years, worked for the Walt Disney Company. I actually worked for the real estate development arm, the Disney Development Company, building the town of Celebration. And after 4 years there, they invited me to leave. Otherwise, they kicked me out. And so where does a single Catholic boy from Orlando move? Well, of course, to Provo, Utah, Winnie, where all the Catholics are, right? No, there were no Catholics in Utah 25 years ago. So I was privileged to be recruited by Dr. Stephen R. Covey, the famous author, and spent 25 years in the company, lived around the world, London, Chicago, and Salt Lake, and like I mentioned, was the chief marketing officer. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I realized that most of my career was spent behind the scenes, as producer and director, as the chief marketing officer. And I realized that I had some insights to share from my own leadership journey. So I started writing books and started writing a column for Inc. magazine, a podcast like yours, a radio program on iHeartRadio, and began to keynote speak a lot. And it's been a remarkable journey. I've learned a ton about that, what my strengths and weaknesses are. I'm actually a stutterer. I have a pronounced speech impediment.
Really?
My entire life has been either with speech pathologists or speech therapists and speech coaches and embraces and headgear and retainers and all that kind of stuff. And so it's unusual for a guy with a really debilitating speech impediment to be on the air. But I've worked hard at overcoming it and talk about it very freely. So if I stutter on a word, you'll know that it's not nerves. It's just kind of who I am as a person. And I own that. And I'm comfortable talking about it and giving power to other people's, dreams and joys. But to your main question, really what motivates me is a spirit of gratitude. I am so immensely grateful for all the people in my journey that have believed in me more than perhaps I believed in myself as a formal or informal mentor, people that really thought I had, more to contribute than perhaps I did at that time myself. They forgave me. They pre-forgave me. They took me under their arm and said, Scott, stop saying that or stop doing that, while still letting me be myself. So I'm very grateful to those people, including those 200 guests that have been on our podcast, where I've learned an immense amount. I think, the biggest lesson I've learned about what motivates me is I try to live my life every day, not, Winnie, through the lens of I have to or I ought to, but rather I get to. I get to get up at 2 a.m. and deliver a podcast via Zoom to a client in Dubai. I get to drive my kids to 3 separate schools in the morning. I get to take out the garbage. I get to terminate someone, not from joy, but I get to release them from perhaps, a job they hate or a mismatch. I really try to live my life through the lens, every decision, every day of I get to do this. Even when I'm having challenges or not feeling like $100, I think of people that are perhaps less fortunate or less privileged than I am. And I try to live my life through a spirit of gratitude in everything I do.
I love that. I get to. Well, I get to spend time with you today, Scott, and I am so grateful to get to do that. And it's so interesting that you say that. You shared something very, very raw and real to us of your challenges with speaking. And I went through the same thing. My first time on CNBC, I didn't think they would have me on again. And I had to go and learn. But I do think these, what some people might call weaknesses, were opportunities for us to really dig deep and learn more about ourselves, right? And get to a point where we feel more confident. So I love this. And 200 guests, Scott, how incredible. Now, Scott, I've heard you say that most, if not all of us, aren't really born as great leaders. So we got to go there, because obviously your podcast is about leadership. Certainly you're a leader to me, to many of us who read your content and, watch your show, listen to your podcast. Do you feel like that you're a great leader today? Because I certainly do. And can you talk about some of the steps that you took to be where you are today, to be that comfortable, to be able to say that, we get to be here today?
Well, I don't know if I'm a great leader, but I'm a better leader than I was last month and 2 years ago and 10 jobs ago. So I'm always improving. I don't know that I believe the concept that people are born great leaders. It doesn't even compute in my head after 30 years in this industry. And I think I have some expertise around that. I'm not sure everyone should be a leader. In fact, I fundamentally disagree with the idea that organizations should create career tracks where you have to lead people in order to be promoted. That's hogwash. Not everyone should be an anesthesiologist. Not everybody should be a commercial airline pilot. Not everybody should be a podcast host. Not everyone should be a leader of people. And I think what happens too often is we promote our star individual contributors, right? The best dental hygienist or the most creative digital designer or the top producing salesperson. And we promote them to be the leader of all salespeople. And that isn't always their right calling. So first and foremost, I would debunk the idea that everyone should be a leader of people. Now, I think informally, you can lead the culture, right? You can lead an initiative or a project. You certainly lead yourself and lead your family. That doesn't mean you should be leading people in the workplace. Our companies need great individual contributors who can spend their time and energy inventing and deciding and listening and growing. And then we need people who can lead and nurture and coach others as well. So I'd say if you're feeling the calling to lead people, kind of ask yourselves these questions: do I take delight in the success of others? Do I like to see people succeed even beyond my level, economically or even professionally? Do I like to collaborate? Do I like to listen? Do I like to coach? Do I like to have high courage conversations to give people feedback on their blind spots? I mean, these are the essence of what leadership really is. And so I am a better leader than I was several years ago. I'm a better listener. I'm more patient. I'm more considerate of other people's points of views and their feelings. I don't think that I have the right idea all the time. When I was the chief marketing officer, for FranklinCovey for a decade, almost 3 times the national average of a CMO of a public company, there used to be a phrase inside the marketing division: best idea wins as long as it's Scott's. And although that was a joke, I think there was a little bit of truth that, Scott was kind of the smartest person in the room, when in fact I wasn't. So I've realized the important role that vulnerability and humility play in being a leader of people.
I love that you say that, because in your discussion of leadership, you haven't talked about the hours in the office. You haven't talked about, pay. You haven't talked about all that. You've talked about more of those very important human traits. Now, we know that most people in companies, maybe not all, I'm sure there are that have found their way through time, but I remember one of my business managers who really helped me a lot. I consider him a mentor. And he said, one thing you got to remember is that you can't change the way people feel. How they feel is how they feel, and how you feel is how you feel. You can just control how you react and your own thought process. So when you're working and thinking for yourself, when you were told, like, Scott's idea is the best idea, what was sort of the first steps to becoming a better leader for yourself to a point that you are today?
I think first, Winnie, I had to challenge my mindset, my belief system, my paradigm. And that is that my job as a leader is not to rush in and save the day. My job as the leader is not to have all the great ideas and solve every single problem. In fact, the effective leader's mindset, Winnie, is that great leaders achieve results with and through other people. I mean, think about that. Leadership is about achieving results with and through other people. And when that becomes your default mindset, everything changes. You listen more, you're more contemplative, you invest in your people, you build their skill sets. You want them to succeed and surpass you. You don't want to be the person that has to rush in and save the day or become the martyr or the victim. That your job is to build up the competencies around you and have them actually complement you. I think the best leaders are those that recognize that humility is actually born out of confidence. It's confident people can be humble, and humble leaders can be confident. Arrogant people are not capable of demonstrating humility. And so I had to really retool my mindset to realize that when the team felt like, well, Scott's the genius and Scott's the know-it-all and Scott has all the ideas, and sometimes they were, not agreeing with me, right? It wasn't really a compliment. In many ways, it was a criticism that, well, Scott has all the genius. We'll just show up to his meetings, let him do all the work. And I realized my job is not to be a one-hit wonder. My job is to recruit and retain great talent, like talent that's noticeably better than mine, and take joy in having them rise up around me. And it took me some maturity. I didn't have that maturity in my 30s or my early 40s. I had to kind of grow into that. I think parenting helped. I was single till I was 41. And although, parenting has its challenges, I've learned a lot about being more patient and not always being right, and letting other ways of doing it, creating a project, earning a result, can be just as valuable as the way I would do it, not always having to be the final word in an argument with my wife as well too. So I think I'm a better leader because I'm more mature as I've aged. And I realize that as a leader, if I'm going to recruit and retain talent, especially now, right in the midst of the great resignation or the great revaluation or whatever is being called in the latest blog post or a column, you've got to make sure that you're having high courage, but kind of intimate conversations with your team members, checking in versus checking on. What are their fears? What are their passions? What are their joys? What do they want to do with their lives and their careers? And how can you be a conduit to help make that happen while hopefully marshaling their talent and genius toward your own business goals? That is the new leadership conversation that probably wasn't happening for decades, if not centuries, in a market economy.
I love that. I love that you shared that. I mean, and you said, humility comes from confidence. I want to come back to that, guys. That was a huge point. And I think that not only humility, but also generosity, that you came to a point where you said, maybe you said it was because you got you got a little bit older, right? You got a little bit more mature, but also you also said that came from learning when you parent. I do agree with that. I always say that I'm a better financial advisor because I'm a mom, and I'm a better mom because I'm a financial advisor. And I think we learn from that not only is sharing the spotlight with other people that comes from confidence, but that's also very, very important to have that generosity so other people can also reach their full potential. And it's not just us, right? Because it can't be just us, because that would be a very, very empty world. But I want to come back to that point that you said earlier too, that not everybody needs to be a leader.
Yeah.
So I know we're getting a lot of, we get a lot of interest when you say that, right? Not everybody needs to be a leader. Not everybody should be a leader. So for someone who maybe is listening to you, still kind of finding their way, maybe they're in their teens or in their 20s, they're hearing you say this, Scott, how can they know whether or not they are a leader, or this is something that's just not in their DNA?
Well, so let me debunk a couple of ideas. And that is that we hear this from human resources a lot, which, by the way, I love human resources. They have saved me from myself on countless occasions. So check to people services. But you hear this phrase, Winnie, that, people are an organization's most valuable asset. That's not true. That is pablum. That is bunk. People are not a company's most valuable asset. It's the relationships between those people that is every organization's killer competitive advantage. Because I can have a guy that has a black belt in Six Sigma, and I can have someone that has as a Rhodes Scholar from Oxford. The two smartest people in the world. But if they can't get along, they can't compliment, forgive, pre-forgive each other, then they're not an asset to me. So as you're looking at your own journey on leadership, you have to ask yourself, am I good at, can I improve at developing relationships with others? Because as you know, Winnie, every company is now a technology company, and every company is in the same business. They are in the people business, the relationship business with your vendors, your suppliers, your funders, your colleagues, your competition, your employees. It's all about relationships now. That's the ultimate competitive advantage is, can your people work at the speed of trust? Can they apologize? Can they compliment each other? Can they cover for each other? Do they trust each other? And so the path to leadership requires you to be what Dr. Covey would say is a light, not a judge, a model, not a critic. So write down all of the competencies that you want to see in people that you work with and work for and that report to you, and you need to become them. Punctual, trustworthy, collaborative, self-aware, patient, but a bias to action, results-oriented, but emotionally agile and be willing to change your mind and be open to influence. And that isn't the right description for every person. What I just described is a great leader. And I wasn't that in my 20s and my 30s, and I'm still working towards being that. I think the question is to become more self-aware. What are your strengths? Maybe they're not in building relationships. Maybe it's not in patience or in visioning. Maybe you actually are a great individual contributor and you crush it at that. And our companies need millions and millions and millions of trustworthy individual producers. But now those people aren't always the best people to promote into leadership or management. Take, for example, a salesperson. I think one of the best traits of a salesperson is someone who is highly competitive. They want to win. They want to be at the top of the scoreboard and leaderboard. They want to be on the stage in Maui with the CEO at Chairman's Club. Those are the kind of people you want to be in individual sales roles. But what happens, Winnie, is often we promote those people to become sales leaders, and now they also still want the limelight. They want the attention. They want to earn the most money. They want to be in competition with their sales team. Those are the exact opposite competencies you want in a sales leader. You want a sales leader to take great joy in the success of everyone around them, get everyone to the finish line in the hopes that, in fact, they might even earn more money than you do. You might not go to President's Club or Chairman's Club, but your team members might. So I think you have to just ask yourself, where are my natural strengths? And am I working in an organization that values, though, and is there a career path for me not being a leader of people? Now, I'm not trying to talk anybody out of leadership. I just think it's important to recognize, is this the right path for you? I'm not sure it was for me. I'm not sure I was destined to be a leader of people. I probably would have been a great, attorney, or a great, residential real estate, or perhaps, a CFP or something. There's great ways to contribute without always being a leader of people. The reason I'm harping on it is because I think too often in organizations, we pull our leaders from the wrong criteria. So if you're in an organization, you're responsible for generating a leadership pipeline of people. Make sure you're sitting down and having the conversation. Hey, Winnie, you're the top salesperson. You've hit your quota 12 quarters in a row. We have a job coming up. We're thinking about promoting you. But Winnie, let's talk about that. You do this, this, and this really well. And these are some areas of growth that you're going to have to learn. In fact, these things you do really well, you might have to stop doing as you move into leadership, and have a real transparent conversation around what skills you'll take with you, what skills you'll leave behind, and what skills you don't have yet but will need to learn in order to thrive as a leader.
I love this.
To have.
It's a very important conversation, Scott. And I'm so glad you highlighted that, because I'm thinking some of you listening are just like, wow, like the sun has come out, because this is so true. Like, as someone who has been in the financial industry for over 2 decades, I remember even my early days at Smith Barney, which then became Morgan Stanley. It was that case where, you were the top producer, and it was Chairman's Club and President's Club and all these different clubs, and you get all these fancy titles. And then when you reach a certain point, they said, oh, then we'll pull you into leadership and have you then manage other people. But you've been trained to compete as a solo practitioner, and now you're asked to lead, which is it doesn't make sense. So I'm really glad that you bring this point up, Scott. I do think that's an opportunity, especially now, having gone through the last few years. We're really doing a deep dive of how we can better workplaces and relationships with our colleagues and our teams. And we just need to be better. And I think that that point alone, I hope that you will consider re-listening to, because it is that important. I'm definitely going to re-listen to it. So let's talk about this. You recently released, I should say, and I know the second one's already done now. So Master Mentors. So you've highlighted 30 really, really important stories that we can learn from in this book, right? But you mentioned over 200 guests that you've had. So I'm just curious, because this is something that I do as well as have guests on the show. How did you even pick, Scott? It's not like, it's like picking your favorite child. How were you able to pick the 30? And maybe you could touch upon some of the stories that really resonate with you that are found in this book. Because one thing I love the fact that you really talked about higher levels of gratitude. For me, you got me right there.
Well, it was clear. I just picked the best looking people. That was it. It was easy, yeah. I'm kidding. Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it in the book. I would have failed. Yeah. I picked people who I thought had a transformational insight. That's a high level, right? A tagline on a book, 30 transformational insights from our greatest minds. Now, certainly these people are some of the most influential people in the world. We've interviewed people like Matthew McConaughey and General McChrystal and Doris Kearns Goodwin. And I mentioned Liz Wiseman, one of the, I think, brightest leadership minds in the world. Susan Cain wrote a book called Quiet about introverts living in a world of extroverts. But it was not difficult to pick people because they all have a profound contribution. So, some of them were, kidnap victims that survived horrific physical and emotional impact. Some of them are survivors of airplane crashes. Wait till you read Master Mentors Volume 2. I'll tell you, one of the chapters I love the most is from Stedman Graham. Now, Stedman Graham is a fairly well-known entrepreneur, philanthropist, businessman, lives in Chicago. Some of you know him as the life partner to Oprah Winfrey.
Right.
And so he's been Oprah Winfrey's life partner for 30 years or plus, and a dear friend of mine for many decades. And, Stedman's a total gentleman, just an absolute finest human being you would ever meet. Stedman writes a lot about identity, and the insight in the book is all around choosing your identity. Now, that's an important part because most of us are merely fulfilling an identity that somebody else placed upon us. Our parents, our guardians, our grandparents, our headmaster, our junior high school principal, our calc teacher in college. But what Stedman says is stop spending your life fulfilling an identity that somebody else placed upon you, and instead choose your own identity. Who is it you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? And for me, it had, Winnie, a profound transformational impact. I was raised in a upper middle class family, as I mentioned, in Central Florida in the 70s. And my father was an engineer type. And so my parents very much valued stability amongst everything, right? In our home, it was, meatloaf every day. No filet mignon and no top ramen. It was meatloaf every day. My parents valued stability over joy, over fun, over excitement, over risk, over physical touch, because they were raised in extremely unstable families. And so my brother went off and got a chemical engineering degree and got an MBA from MIT. He checked the box of what my parents valued. Now, I think those were also probably his natural talents, but I spent many years struggling to fulfill an identity that I think my parents valued. I learned that in life, there are two types of professions: people who are specialists, my brother, chemical engineer, and then people who are generalists, people like me. I've been in sales, I've been in marketing and project management. I write, I speak, I podcast, I do a lot of different things. And for many years, I was crippled with kind of envy and jealousy of people like you and my brother who were more specialist. Now, one's not good or bad, but had I heard back in my 20s, Scott, you're not a specialist, you're a generalist. Go gather all these skills in your 20s and 30s and 40s and be patient. Don't look at the patent attorney. Don't look at the orthopedic surgeon. Don't look at the chartered financial analyst. That's not who you are. Who you are is a generalist. And Scott, you'll come into your own a little later, but the wisdom and the knowledge and the experience and the mistakes you'll make will be invaluable once you learn how to bring all those together. And so for me, it was a profound understanding to own that I was a generalist, and that's okay in an often world that supports and values specialists. Neither are good or bad. They're both great. Just kind of find out which one best suits you. So to your question around the chapters, Stedman Graham's chapter around identity for me was life-changing. And there's others, 29 others. They're all very short, easy, breezy chapters. You can read a chapter in 5 minutes, and there's some questions at the end. You can watch the podcast, but that's the one I think I like the most. That probably isn't the one that I started out liking the most, but I think it's the one that's had the biggest impact on me and perhaps others as I've given speeches at companies and conferences around the world.
So Stedman Graham's story really helped you own the feeling that a generalist, you now better understand your value. Is that what you're sharing with us?
It's true, but I mean, think about what it would like to be married to the most famous person in the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you create an identity out of being Oprah Winfrey's life partner? I mean, this woman has billions of dollars and she is a worldwide brand. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to compete with Oprah. And I think there's so much insight to learn how Stedman Graham has created an identity, both independent and probably somewhat dependent with Oprah. I think there's just great insight to learn. What is your identity independent of your spouse or your partner or your children or your job or your title or your W-2 or your 1099 or your business card or your degree? And I really liked the challenge that he put me up against was to stop fulfilling an identity that my family had perhaps purposely or perhaps unconsciously placed upon me, and instead live my life fulfilling identity that I wanted to choose for myself, which just happened to be that of the path of a generalist. I went to college, I got a communications degree. I started in real estate, and then I kind of went into sales and then to marketing. And I mentioned that. And I was quite deliberate with my career but I wasn't quite sure what my passion would be. And here now in my early 50s, it clearly is interviewing and speaking and writing. And hopefully I've got some talent in that area. Didn't earlier in life. I built that through a lot of hard work and a lot of press releases that were horrible and a lot of blogs that probably are embarrassing now. But I think there's great value to learn from Stedman around choose your own identity based on your values, based on your passions, based on what brings you joy, not based on what perhaps someone else important in your life, but not the person who should choose your identity for you.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's incredible. I love it. I can't wait to read that chapter. Let me ask you this, a very serious question. So how often do you eat meatloaf now?
Well, it was kind of a metaphor, to tell you the truth, right? But you know, my parents are wonderful people. They're still married, 60 years. They still live in the same house I was raised in. And I value them tremendously. And I also understand what drives them may not drive me. And again, this isn't a parenting podcast or a marital podcast, but I've learned a lot about creating my own values. This is, I think, an important point, Winnie. One of the things that I've learned is when I was in my 30s, I got very deliberate about identifying my values in life. This is a pithy statement we throw around a lot. But I was at a conference with one of our co-founders, and I took the time to identify what are Scott Miller's values. And there's 7 of them. And they're an acronym, PHILPAL, P-H-I-L-P-A-L, purpose, health, integrity, loyalty, positivity, abundance, and learning. I'll repeat them. Purpose, health, integrity, loyalty, positivity, abundance, and learning. And those 7 values drive everything I do in life. All my yeses, all my nos, all my maybes, the things I write, the things I read, how I spend my time. And so your question about Meatloaf is I'm now able to create a life for myself that is directly dependent and correlated and aligned with my values. And it might be my value is to save more money or to spend more money or to have filet mignon or to save it and have top ramen. You get the point. It's more of a metaphor than it is literal. But I encourage all your listeners and viewers, if you've not taken the time to sit down and write out your values, you must do this. And not values that you think I will like or Winnie will like. What I and Winnie think about your values is immaterial. You write your values out of what brings you joy, brings you meaning, brings voice to you as a unique human being. And you will be unstoppable once you start making decisions about careers and jobs and investments and purchases and decisions and marriages and relationships that align with your values.
I love that. We're going to do this. We're going to do this exercise. We're all going to commit to writing down our values, Scott. So let me ask you, I'm going to segue a little bit because I think this is really topical. I think a lot of us are listening, watching you, listening to you right now and saying, we've gone through a lot through the pandemic, the last few years. It's been really, really heavy, really big. A lot of employees are thinking, should I change jobs? Should I stick to where I'm at? A lot of businesses are having trouble even hiring the right team or bringing on more employees, full-time, part-time. So what do you think? Are there more leadership opportunities? What is your thinking with the pandemic? What are some areas that we should be paying attention to?
So, I think it was Ariana Huffington who just a week ago renamed it, not the Great Resignation, but the Great Reevaluation. And I think that's so insightful because everyone is reevaluating what they want in life post-pandemic. I interviewed someone today on a podcast. It was the CEO of AARP, 40 million members. And she said that 900,000 people in the US died from the pandemic. And I think she said 95% of them were over the age of 50. Interesting stat. All of us have been touched by this pandemic. We were all in the same storm, not all in the same boat. I had 2 friends that passed away, and I have a friend right now who is intubated. Everyone is reassessing what they want out of their life, how they want to spend their time, who they are and are not willing to report to, what they are and are not willing to tolerate in their professional setting. I think we're going to see a sea change of people who no longer want to have their identity be their title, that their job is important, their career is important. I mean, my number one professional value, Winnie, is maximizing my income, which leads me to the reminder that in addition to identifying your personal values, you must also identify your professional values. And I think they're different. And if you don't do that, you can never tell when they are in conflict or when perhaps they are beautifully aligned. My number one professional value is maximize my income. My number one personal value is my purpose in life. I think now my purpose in life is to raise these 3 young boys as gentlemen in a very difficult world. Those things aren't always congruent, are they? I can't make money raising boys. I have to go do things that take time away from my boys. My number 2 value is to work with a brand and a company that I'm proud of to represent. My number 3 value is to work with people that I love and respect. And so I think once you identify your personal values, you have to identify also your professional values to know when each should trump another. I think in hopefully the post-pandemic world, there's going to be enormous opportunity. When people are quitting now, they're quitting for all different reasons. Some of them are quitting because their house price doubled and their portfolio was, exponentially increased and they could afford to retire early. Others are quitting because they worked for a bad boss or a corrupt culture. Others, when you ask them where they're going, they say, I don't know. Wait, you quit your job with no job? Yeah. I just want to be happy in life. Maybe I'll open up a eBay store. Maybe I'll create an NFT. Maybe I'll trade crypto. I mean, everyone's different. It's increasingly vital that you make your decisions based on your values. I think there's an economy that's going to explode. It'll have fits and starts, but I mean, the opportunities that our company has at FranklinCovey are like unprecedented in terms of what's happening post-pandemic. All the opportunities that are being opened and the different ways to access information and share entertainment. And so there's no question there will be massive opportunity for leadership positions, if that's the right calling for you post-pandemic. The world will look very different. We'll swing back. Things always swing far right, far left. Look at the White House the last 100 years. I mean, everyone should know by now that extreme in anything never is sustainable. All things in moderation, Meatloaf included.
Meatloaf included. I love it. Okay, I had to ask you this question, and this will be my last because I've taken so much of your time already. But I know all of you want to learn more. Let me just tell you, you can listen to Scott every week. He's got an amazing podcast. You're definitely going to want to do this. But here's what I ask you. I've heard you talk about that. One of the things that you found is the importance of learning to make better decisions, when to say yes or no to an important lesson. This was something that you talked about, I know, on several shows. You need to talk a little bit about that and share maybe when a yes factor or aha moment really made you pivot in your life.
I think highly effective people are great at managing their energy, managing their attention, and managing their decisions. I mean, think about it, right? Our reputations, our individual brands are merely a collection of all the choices and decisions we've made in our lives. I mean, you think about it, you're the CEO of your own brand, you're the CEO of your own institution. And so high value decision-making is probably also an increasingly indisputable competency among professionals. What you say yes, what you say no to. I'm not great at this. I'm an abundant person. I like to help people. I'm a fairly social person with a lot of connections. I like to lift and help and pollinate and aggregate. And so I take on too much. But I also recognize that my reputation is about making and keeping commitments. Because, you build trust when you make a commitment. You keep trust when you keep a commitment. At the end of the day, nothing is more valuable than your brand as a trustworthy person. When I'm in keynotes all the time, I'll say, raise your hand if you're trustworthy, and 6,000 hands go up. And I say, nice, but no, put your hands down. Who decides if you are trustworthy? It's the other person. You have to behave yourself into a reputation of being trusted by others through the wise decisions you make, what you say yes to and what you say no to. A lot of us are people pleasers in the workplace, in our personal lives, I among them. And so no is hard. So you have to practice saying no. You have to practice saying, I would love to help you, but right now, I am completely committed on my time and my energy and my creativity. And if something changes, I promise to call you, but I would rather disappoint you now than say yes and then disappoint you later when I don't deliver to your expectations. So I think as people begin to identify their values, their decisions will become clear. Their ability to say no will become obviously clear because it doesn't align with either your personal or professional values. I think it's the fundamental aspect of being a highly effective people in 2022 and beyond.
I love it. Amazing. Amazing, Scott. Just amazing. I feel like I feel like we could write a whole book just about you, Scott. This is incredible. But let's have some fun. I want to
But I
say
have to say no because I'm overcommitted right now. But Winnie, if my time changes, I'll come back to you.
okay, we'll make that no a yes one day. We'll figure that out. We'll figure it out for sure. We love this. Okay, I got to share some comments that were coming. We're getting so many comments. Vicky is being enlightened. She's saying so interesting. Cross-X Fighter is saying that the serious question is making me hungry. I know the meatloaf question. Robin's enjoying the conversation. Thank you so all of you for joining this this talk that we're having with Scott. So let's do this. I know you all love this round, and that is the speed round. So Scott, guess what? We're gonna put a minute on the clock and give you 2 questions for you to answer. How's that sound?
I got 30 seconds each. Go.
All right. Let's go. All right. So here's your question, Scott. So Scott, first, you and I both have 3 kids. In fact, 3 sons each. And if you were to give them one piece of advice today that would help them in the future, what would you tell them?
People behave the way they do for reasons. So be kind, be caring, be less judgmental. People don't behave irrationally for no reason at all. Be kind to people. You never know what's going on in someone else's life.
I love that. Thank you. All right. Second
That's
question.
probably not what you expected, but that's what came to my heart right now.
I expected it, actually. Now I feel like I know you, Scott, and I did actually expect it because it actually feels like something I would say to my kids. So I love that. So Scott, second question then. Here's a fun one. You've just been given a 2-week vacation anywhere in the world. Now I know you've lived in a lot of different places. Where do you go and who do you take with you? And of course, that fun part is, do you or don't you take your microphone?
Well, it would be the Amalfi Coast in Italy. I would hope it would be in June or July. I love southern Italy. I've been all over Italy. And so I would go to Sorrento and explore Italy with my wife, Stephanie, probably without my children because we had 3 boys in 5 years. My wife was pregnant the day after our honeymoon, so we never really had a chance to, have that kind of early phase in life. So I think I would have Stephanie come with me. And would I take my mic? No, I would do my best to honor the presence of my wife by being present. As an entrepreneur and a guy that's got a lot of hands on a lot of things, I am easily distracted, and I need to make sure that the most important relationship in my life is that with my wife. So I would not take my microphone, and we would go to southern Italy for 2 weeks.
I love it. And you would have the most amazing time and the most delicious food, and we would definitely celebrate the 2 of you. And what a
But
wonderful
I would take my
way.
phone and post it on Instagram, just so you know.
Okay, there's priorities, so that's good, Scott. At least we would see photos. I love this. Well, Scott, I can't tell you I can't even begin to tell you how grateful I am to have met you, and to spend this time with you, to learn from you, and to be able to share you with our community, our friends on this show. It has been such a joy. And honestly, I can't wait to meet you in person. So hopefully we can do that one day. But thank you so much. Anything else that you would like to share, or things that you're working on that we should really, well, most importantly, where should we follow you to learn about what's next on your plate?
Well, you can find me at scottjeffreymiller.com. All my blogs and columns and articles and podcasts and books are there. scottjeffreymiller.com. Connect to me on all of my social sites, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, you name it, Facebook, LinkedIn. Can I share a final thought with you? Can I share a final thought, Winnie?
I would love to hear a final thought from you.
I think the biggest lesson I've learned in my career is there's a difference between being efficient and being effective. Dr. Covey wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This book has sold nearly 50 million copies. And people often mistitle it as The 7 Habits of Highly Efficient People. There's a fundamental difference between being efficient and being effective. I'm a very efficient person. You can tell this with my personality and my energy and my projects. And it served me very well in life. All of my financial success and my professional success has probably come from my productivity, my efficiency. Like all strengths, when overplayed, they become our weaknesses. And I often take that efficiency mindset, Winnie, and I move it into my relationships with others. Our relationships are our most important, I think, valuable asset in the world. And so, to quote Dr. Covey, with people, fast is slow, and slow is fast. So for those of you that can relate to my efficiency mindset, don't stop doing that. But recognize that's great for email and social media and washing the car and raking the yard and some things like that. But don't treat your relationships like you wash your car or mow the lawn. You've got to consciously slow down and move out of your efficiency mindset and move into a effectiveness mindset. And that's been a profound impact on the way that I try to nurture and maintain my relationships. It's not natural for me. I'm a naturally efficient person, kind of, check it off and it's done. And that's not how you influence people or build trust with others. Thanks for the extra minute there.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for taking that moment, because that was just so much gold right now. Thank you so much, Scott. Incredible. And
You're
for
a class
those,
act.
well, I try. But for those of you who do please do check out Scott's website. We definitely will make sure to share that with all of you. And just as a little fun thing, I recommend you take a look at his bio. That's actually really, really fun. It's the first time I've seen a bio written that way. So I highly recommend you check it out. And then if you do that, definitely let me know what you think of it. And I think it'll spark some joy in your life. But thank you so much, Scott, for your time and just being so gracious with us. And thank you for all my friends for watching and supporting our program here today. And thank you so much for listening to the words of Scott today, because I think these are going to stick with me for the rest of my life. So please take a moment to share the show with someone that you care about. And as a reminder, you can find full episodes of Level Up on the CW San Francisco, NASDAQ, of course, Amazon Fire, and Roku. So be well, and I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Take care, my friends. And Scott, please hang out with us, because I'm going to need you a little bit longer.
My pleasure.